That sapphire is absolutely breathtaking. It was a gift from someone very special. Evelyn.
10 years of marriage vanished the moment she walked into our anniversary gala. She was young, stunning, and completely uninvited. But the real betrayal wasn't her hand wrapped around my husband's arm, it was the custom-cut heirloom sapphire glittering on her finger, the exact ring I reported stolen yesterday. My grandmother always told me that a marriage is a house built on a foundation of 1,000 little secrets. I never really understood what she meant until the foundation of my own marriage began to crack, quietly at first, and then with a deafening roar. It started with a piece of jewelry. Not just any piece of jewelry, but a ring that held the weight of a century of Flores family history. When Demont proposed to me, he didn't do it with a modern diamond from a commercial jeweler. He did it with his great-grandmother's 4-carat, cushion-cut Ceylon sapphire, framed by an intricate, asymmetrical halo of crushed diamonds. It was a ring that demanded attention, a ring that felt heavy on my finger, a constant reminder of the legacy I was marrying into. 7 years into our marriage, the original platinum band had weakened, and Demont and I spent weeks sitting with a boutique jeweler named Gregory on Fifth Avenue, redesigning the setting. We added 2 hidden rubies on the underside of the band, one for my birthstone, one for his. It was utterly unique. It was unequivocally mine. 4 days before our lavish 10-year anniversary party, it disappeared. I remember the morning perfectly. It was a Tuesday. I had taken the ring off, as I always did, placing it in the small, velvet-lined catch-all dish on the kitchen island before kneading dough for a focaccia. I turned my back to wash my hands, wiped down the marble counters, and when I looked back at the dish, it was empty. Panic is a cold, sharp thing. It starts in the center of your chest and radiates outward, freezing your blood. I tore the kitchen apart. I pulled out every drawer, emptied the trash can piece by piece onto the hardwood floor, and even unscrewed the P-trap beneath the kitchen sink, ruining a $300 silk blouse with foul-smelling sludge. Nothing. When Demont came home that evening, his reaction was not the comforting embrace I expected. He found me sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by garbage and tools, my hands shaking, tears streaming down my face. "What is going on in here, Christa?" he asked, his voice clipped, his briefcase dropping onto the foyer table with a heavy thud. "My ring," I choked out, looking up at him. He looked so impeccably put together in his tailored charcoal suit, perfectly contrasting my disheveled state. "The sapphire. Demont, it's gone. I left it in the dish, and it's just gone." Instead of kneeling beside me, Demont sighed heavily. He pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I had come to associate with his annoyance toward his subordinates at the tech firm he ran. "Christa, honestly, you are always so careless with your things. How do you just lose a priceless family heirloom?" "I didn't lose it," I snapped, the injustice of his accusation cutting through my panic. "I put it right there. No one has been in the house except—" My voice trailed off. No one had been in the house, just me. And Demont, who had come home for a brief lunch before heading back to the office. "Except who?" Demont challenged, crossing his arms. "The ghost of my grandmother? Or maybe you accidentally swept it into the trash when you were being domestic. You've been entirely distracted lately. You forgot to pick up my dry cleaning last week, too." He was gaslighting me, though I didn't want to admit it then. For the past 6 months, Demont had been a ghost in our home. He was the CEO of a rapidly expanding logistics software company, and his sudden frequent trips to their new Chicago branch had left me alone in our sprawling Connecticut home for weeks at a time. When he was home, his phone was perpetually glued to his hand, placed face down on the dining table, buzzing at 2:00 a.m. with server alerts. I had tried to be the supportive wife, the bedrock he needed while he conquered the corporate world. But his coldness that night on the kitchen floor planted a seed of dark, terrible suspicion in my mind. The next 3 days were a nightmare. I hired a private search service to sweep the house. I filed a police report for a stolen item, which infuriated Demont. "You're going to embarrass us, Christa," he hissed over his morning coffee. "Having cops crawling around the house days before the anniversary gala? It's pathetic. Drop it. I'll buy you a new ring." "It's not about the money, Demont. It's the sentiment. It has our birthstones hidden in the band." "It's just a rock," he muttered, turning his attention back to his phone. A soft smile played on his lips as he typed a message, a smile he hadn't given me in months. I called my best friend, Samantha Brooks, in tears. Sam was a no-nonsense divorce attorney, a woman who saw the absolute worst in men every single day. She came over with 2 bottles of Merlot and a cynical edge. "I'm telling you, Christa, rings don't just walk away," Sam said, pouring us generous glasses. "And husbands don't dismiss the loss of a family heirloom unless they know exactly where it is, or they simply don't care about the family anymore. Have you checked his credit cards? His phone?" "I don't snoop, Sam," I said defensively, wiping my eyes. "We don't have that kind of marriage." "Honey," Sam said gently, tapping her immaculate crimson nails against her wineglass. "Every woman who sits in my office crying over alimony says the exact same thing. Open your eyes. He's been distant. He's hyper-protective of his electronics. He travels to Chicago twice a month. And now, you're missing a piece of high-value, untraceable jewelry? Just be careful. The gala is on Saturday. Put on a brave face, but keep your eyes open." I didn't want to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that I was just losing my mind, that I had accidentally thrown the ring away. But as Saturday approached, the knot in my stomach only tightened. The night of our 10-year anniversary party was supposed to be a celebration of our triumph. We had started from nothing, living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, while Demont coded his software on a folding table, eating instant ramen while I worked 3 jobs to pay our rent. Now, we were hosting 200 of the state's elite at the Street Regis Ballroom. The contrast was staggering, yet I had never felt emptier. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in our master suite, staring at my reflection. I wore a custom emerald green silk gown that clung to my curves, my hair swept up in an elegant chignon. My makeup was flawless, hiding the dark circles of 4 sleepless nights. But my left hand felt incredibly light, completely naked without the heavy weight of the sapphire. Demont walked in, looking devastatingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo. He paused, looking at my reflection in the mirror rather than directly at me. "You look beautiful," he said, though his tone was practiced, almost rehearsed. "Are you ready? The board members are already arriving." "I feel naked without my ring, Demont," I whispered. He frowned, adjusting his bow tie. "We talked about this, Christa. Don't mention the ring tonight. I don't want Arthur or the investors thinking we're dealing with a home invasion or that you're losing your grip. It's bad optics. Tonight is about presenting a united, successful front. Can you do that for me? Can you do that for me? Not a comfort, but a command." "Of course," I said, my voice hollow. I slipped my arm through his, feeling the stiff, expensive fabric of his suit. The ballroom was breathtaking. Thousands of white orchids cascaded from the ceiling, crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the room, and a string quartet played soft, classical arrangements of modern pop songs. The catering staff moved silently among the guests, offering flutes of vintage Dom Perignon and beluga caviar on tiny blinis. For the first 2 hours, I played my part flawlessly. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I laughed at Arthur Pendleton's terrible jokes. Arthur was the chairman of the board, a man whose approval Demont desperately craved. "Christa, my dear," Arthur boomed, kissing my cheek. 10 years! And you look younger than the day Demont brought you to the first company picnic. Tell me, how do you put up with this workaholic?" "It takes a lot of patience, Arthur," I replied smoothly, gripping my champagne flute tightly. "And a lot of wine." The men chuckled. Demont pulled me close, wrapping his arm around my waist, kissing my temple. To the outside world, we were the golden couple. But beneath his tuxedo jacket, his body was rigid, and I could feel the faint, rhythmic buzzing of his phone in his inner pocket. Buzz, buzz, buzz. He was receiving a barrage of messages, and every time the vibration hit my side, Demont's jaw twitched. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, cornered me near the ice sculpture. Evelyn was a terrifying woman who wore Chanel like a suit of armor and had never truly forgiven me for my middle-class upbringing. "Christa," she purred, her eyes immediately darting to my left hand. "Where is Beatrice's ring? I specifically told Demont I wanted to see it tonight. It belongs in the spotlight at an event like this." I felt the blood drain from my face. Demont had explicitly told me not to tell anyone, especially his mother. "Oh, Evelyn," I stammered, my mind racing. The clasp, the setting was feeling a bit loose. I took it to Gregory's to have the prongs tightened. I didn't want to risk losing it tonight. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, sharp as shattered glass. How careless. You should always maintain your pieces before a major event. It shows a lack of foresight. She took a sip of her martini and drifted away, leaving me feeling small and humiliated. I retreated to a quiet corner near the terrace doors, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. Sam found me there, slipping her arm through mine. "You're doing great, sweetie," Sam murmured. "But Demont looks like he's about to jump out of his skin. He's checked his phone 12 times in the last 20 minutes. I've been counting." I looked across the room. Demont was standing by the bar, ostensibly listening to the CFO, but his eyes were darting toward the grand double doors of the ballroom. He looked anxious, expectant. He kept checking his platinum Rolex. "He invited someone," I said, a sudden realization washing over me. "Someone he's nervous about." "A VIP client?" Sam guessed. "Maybe. But why wouldn't he tell me?" Before Sam could answer, the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom opened. The maitre d' stepped aside, and a woman walked in. The room didn't go completely silent, but there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. She was undeniably beautiful, probably 10 years younger than my 34 years. She possessed that effortless, glowing youth that couldn't be bought. She was wearing a backless crimson gown that clung to her like a second skin, her dark hair cascading in loose, perfect waves over one bare shoulder. She walked with a confident, almost predatory grace. But what truly made my stomach plummet was Demont's reaction. From across the room, I watched his posture entirely change. The rigid corporate CEO melted away. His shoulders dropped, his eyes softened, and a genuine, unguarded smile spread across his face, the exact smile I had been begging to see for months. He quickly excused himself from the CFO and practically jogged to intercept her before she made it past the reception tables. "Who the hell is that?" Sam whispered, her lawyer instincts flaring. "I don't know," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Demont leaned in close to her. He didn't touch her, there were too many eyes, but the invisible magnetism between them was undeniable. They occupied their own private orbit. He whispered something to her, and she threw her head back, laughing warmly, revealing a long, elegant neck. I felt sick. "Come on," Sam said, gripping my elbow with iron strength. "We are the hosts. Let's go welcome the new guest." Every step across the ballroom felt like wading through wet cement. My mind was screaming at me to turn around, to run to the nearest bathroom and lock the door, but my pride kept my chin high. I plastered on my brightest, most welcoming smile as Sam and I approached them. Demont saw me coming, and for a fraction of a second, absolute panic flashed in his eyes. He quickly masked it with his smooth, executive charm, taking a half step away from the woman in the red dress. "Christa, darling," Demont said, his voice a pitch too high, a fraction too loud. "I was just coming to find you. I want to introduce you to a very crucial part of our expansion team." I stopped in front of them, projecting every ounce of grace I had cultivated over a decade of corporate dinners. Up close, she was even more flawless. Her perfume was intoxicating, something expensive, heavy on the jasmine and sandalwood. "I'm Christa Flores," I said, extending my hand. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure." The woman smiled, a slow, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was incredibly soft. "Chaya Allen," she said, her voice husky and melodic. "VP of Marketing for the new Chicago branch. Demont has told me so much about you, Christa. Truly." "Has he?" I asked, looking sideways at my husband, who was suddenly very interested in his shoes. "He rarely mentions the Chicago staff to me. He likes to keep work and home life strictly separate." "Well," Chaya laughed softly, dropping my hand, "some projects require a bit more intimate collaboration. We've been working very closely these past 6 months." 6 months. The exact timeline of Demont's sudden distance, the constant trips, the late-night texts. Sam shifted her weight next to me, vibrating with silent hostility on my behalf. "It's a beautiful party," Chaya continued, casually brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. As she raised her left hand to do so, she caught the light of the massive chandelier above us. A flash of deep, ocean blue brilliance struck my eyes. My breath caught in my throat. I froze, my eyes locking onto her left hand, which she was now elegantly resting against her collarbone. On her middle finger sat a massive, 4-carat cushion-cut Ceylon sapphire, surrounded by a unique, asymmetrical diamond halo. The room around me faded into a dull, rushing roar, like I was suddenly underwater. I could hear Sam asking Chaya a question. I could hear the string quartet playing in the background, but it all sounded miles away. I stared at the ring. It wasn't just similar. It wasn't a replica. I knew every facet of that stone. I knew the slight imperfection on the bottom left edge of the diamond halo, where the jeweler's tool had slipped during the reset. But I needed to be absolutely sure. "That is a stunning ring, Chaya," I heard myself say. My voice sounded detached, robotic, coming from somewhere outside my body. Chaya looked down at her hand, her smile widening into something almost victorious. She held her hand out slightly, offering it for my inspection. "Thank you, Christa. It's a recent gift from someone very special." Demont cleared his throat violently. "Chaya, Arthur is over by the bar. I really need to introduce you to him before the speeches start." "In a moment, Demont," I snapped, the ice in my tone freezing him in his tracks. I reached out and took Chaya's hand, bringing it closer to my face under the guise of admiring the jewelry. She allowed it, clearly enjoying the power play. I turned her hand slightly, letting the light hit the underside of the platinum band. There they were, two tiny microscopic rubies set flush into the metal. My birthstone, Demont's birthstone. It was my ring, my missing, stolen, beloved ring. My husband had taken my family heirloom, the symbol of our decade-long marriage, and gifted it to his mistress. And then he had brought her to our 10-year anniversary party, letting her parade my stolen legacy in front of our friends, our family, and my own two eyes. The audacity of it was so astronomical, so completely sociopathic, that I felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my chest. I bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper to keep it in. I looked up from the ring, my eyes meeting Chaya's. She wasn't ignorant. The defiant, mocking gleam in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She knew exactly whose ring it was. She had worn it on purpose. This was a territorial display. She was marking her territory in my house, on my anniversary. Demont looked pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He finally realized that I had seen it. He knew that I knew. He braced himself, his shoulders tensing, preparing for the inevitable explosion. He expected me to scream. He expected me to throw my champagne in Chaya's face. He expected me to cause a massive scene in front of the board of directors, proving his narrative that I was an unstable, careless wife. But I was a wife who had spent 10 years navigating the vicious, calculated world of high society corporate politics. I didn't get mad. I got dangerous. I slowly released Chaya's hand and let out a soft, delighted gasp. "It is breathtaking, Chaya," I said loudly enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "Vintage, isn't it? It looks remarkably like an old piece my mother-in-law, Evelyn, owns. She is quite the connoisseur. You absolutely must show it to her. In fact, she's standing right over there by the ice sculpture. She would be thrilled to inspect the craftsmanship." Chaya's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Demont's eyes widened in sheer terror. Evelyn Flores was a traditionalist monster who worshipped the family heirlooms. If she saw Chaya wearing Beatrice's sapphire, she would annihilate them both, right here in the middle of the dance floor. "Oh, I wouldn't want to bother her," Chaya said quickly, taking a step back. "Nonsense," I insisted, looping my arm aggressively through Chaya's, trapping her. My grip was like a vice. "Evelyn!" I called out, waving my free hand toward my terrifying mother-in-law. "Evelyn, darling, come here. Demont's new VP has the most fascinating piece of vintage jewelry I need you to appraise." Demont stepped forward, his voice a frantic whisper. "Christa, don't do this." I turned my head and gave my husband a smile so venomous it could have withered the orchids hanging above us. "Oh, Demont," I whispered back. "I haven't even started yet." Evelyn parted the crowd of socialites like a seasoned shark gliding through a school of guppies. Her silver hair caught the chandelier light, and her sharp eyes, cold and eternally assessing, were fixed entirely on my raised hand, which was still firmly locked around Chaya's wrist. As my mother-in-law approached, the ambient chatter in our immediate vicinity began to organically die down. People instinctively sensed the sudden, crushing shift in barometric pressure. "Christa," Evelyn stated, her voice a dry gin martini, sharp and devoid of warmth. "You bellowed. In a ballroom. We are not at a baseball game." "Forgive me, Evelyn," I replied, my voice steady, coated in an artificial sweetness that made my own teeth ache. But I simply could not contain my excitement. I know how deeply you revere historical craftsmanship, and Demont's associate here, Chaya, was just showing off a remarkable new gift. It looked so startlingly familiar that I just had to get your expert opinion. I yanked Chaya's hand forward into the space between us. Chaya tried to pull back, a panicked, breathy, please escaping her glossed lips, but adrenaline had turned my muscles to steel. I held her wrist aloft like a referee, declaring the winner of a vicious blood sport. Demont lunged forward, his face flushed a mottled, dangerous crimson. Mother, it's nothing. A cheap replica, honestly. Christa has just had too much champagne. Let's go to the terrace. Silence, Demont, Evelyn snapped without even looking at him. Her terrifying gaze was completely anchored to the massive, ocean blue stone resting on Chaya's middle finger. I watched the exact moment comprehension struck my mother-in-law. It wasn't a slow realization, it was a violent, physical impact. Evelyn's rigid posture stiffened even further. Her perfectly manicured hand reached out, her fingers hovering millimeters from the Ceylon sapphire. She didn't touch Chaya's skin. Evelyn would never demean herself by making physical contact with a stranger in this context, but she leaned in close enough to inspect the asymmetrical diamond halo. Take it off, Evelyn commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an imperial decree. Chaya's corporate bravado completely evaporated. The confident, predatory woman who had sauntered into my ballroom minutes ago was gone, replaced by a trembling, out-of-her-depth girl who suddenly realized she had wandered into a very expensive, very lethal trap. She looked at Demont for salvation, but Demont was paralyzed, hyperventilating slightly, his eyes darting around the room to see who was watching. Everyone was watching. Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of the board, had drifted over from the bar, a scotch in his hand, his bushy eyebrows furrowed in confusion. Several other board members and their wives had formed a loose, silent perimeter around our disastrous little tableau. I said, Evelyn repeated, dropping her voice to a guttural, terrifying register, take off the ring. With shaking fingers, Chaya reached across her body, twisted the heavy platinum band, and slid it off her finger. She dropped it into Evelyn's open palm as if the metal were white hot. Evelyn produced a pair of reading glasses from her clutch, perched them on her nose, and held the ring up to the crystal light of the chandelier. She turned it over. I watched her eyes trace the underside of the band. I knew exactly what she was looking at. The two tiny microscopic rubies set flush into the metal. The undeniable proof. For 10 agonizing seconds, the only sound in our corner of the ballroom was the soft, romantic swell of the string quartet playing a classical rendition of a modern pop song, blissfully unaware of the absolute carnage unfolding on the floor. Evelyn lowered the ring. She slowly took off her glasses. When she finally looked at her son, the disgust in her eyes was so profound it almost made me feel a microscopic twinge of pity for him. Almost. Beatrice's sapphire, Evelyn said, her voice carrying the lethal weight of an executioner's axe. My grandmother's ring, the cornerstone of the Flores family legacy. You told me it was at the jeweler, Christa. I was mistaken, Evelyn, I said loudly, ensuring Arthur and the surrounding investors could hear every single syllable. I reported it stolen to the police on Tuesday. Demont was furious with me. He told me I was careless. He told me I had lost my mind. It turns out, he hadn't lost the ring at all. He had just relocated it to Chicago. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the immediate circle of eavesdroppers. Mother, I can explain, Demont pleaded, his voice cracking. He reached out to touch her arm, but Evelyn slapped his hand away with a vicious crack that echoed over the music. Do not touch me, Evelyn hissed, vibrating with aristocratic rage. You stole a priceless family heirloom from your wife, filed a false police report in our family name, and placed it on the finger of your alot? She turned her gaze to Chaya, scanning her up and down as if she were a piece of rotting garbage on the sidewalk. And then you had the unfathomable stupidity to bring her to a room filled with my friends and my investors. You are not just a disgrace to your marriage, Demont. You are an absolute, catastrophic liability to this family. Liability, Arthur Pendleton echoed, stepping fully into the circle, his face set in stone. The jovial chairman from an hour ago was entirely gone. Demont, my office, Monday morning, 8 a.m. Bring your legal counsel. This kind of reckless, impulsive behavior, the deceit, the public humiliation of your wife, it severely calls into question your judgment as CEO of this company. Arthur, please. This is a personal matter, Demont begged, practically sweating through his custom tuxedo. You made it a professional matter the moment you brought your mistress to a company-sponsored gala and paraded her in front of your board of directors. Arthur countered coldly. He turned to me, offering a polite, deferential nod. Christa, I am so terribly sorry for this disruption. You have my deepest sympathies. Thank you, Arthur, I said, maintaining perfect, regal composure. Inside, my heart was a roaring inferno of triumph. Chaya burst into tears. Realizing she was entirely surrounded by hostile forces, she turned on her heel and pushed her way through the crowd, her crimson dress disappearing toward the exit. She didn't look back. She didn't even ask for her purse. Demont stood there, utterly isolated. In the span of 5 minutes, he had lost his mistress, the respect of his mother, the backing of his chairman, and any shred of dignity he possessed. Evelyn turned back to me. She looked exhausted, older than her years, but she reached out and took my left hand. With surprising gentleness, she slid the heavy sapphire back onto my ring finger. It settled into place perfectly. You played this masterfully, Christa, Evelyn whispered, so quietly only I could hear. I never liked you, but God help me, I respect you. Ruin him. She walked away, head held high, leaving Demont and me standing in the wreckage of our 10-year marriage. Are you happy now? Demont snarled, abandoning all pretense, his face twisting into an ugly mask of hatred. You just destroyed my career over a piece of jewelry. No, Demont, I replied, signaling to the maitre d' to bring me a fresh glass of champagne. You destroyed your career over a piece of jewelry. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see. The Monday following the gala was a masterclass in scorched earth tactics. I didn't wait for Demont to pack his bags. While he was at his disastrous 8 a.m. meeting with Arthur Pendleton, I had a premium moving company box up every single item he owned and deliver it to the lobby of the cheapest motel I could find in Hartford. I changed the locks, upgraded the security system, and sat down at the large mahogany dining table with Samantha Brooks, 3 boxes of financial documents, and a private investigator we had hired the night of the party. You are not going to believe this, Christa, Sam said, her eyes practically gleaming with predatory legal joy as she spread out a series of bank statements and corporate filings. Your husband isn't just a cheater. He's a colossal, criminally incompetent idiot. Tell me, I said, sipping black coffee. The heavy sapphire was back on my finger, anchoring me to reality. First of all, Chaya Allen. She's not the VP of marketing for the Chicago branch, Sam explained, tapping a manicured nail against a dossier. The Chicago branch doesn't even have a marketing department yet. Chaya's real name is Chaya Jenkins. She's a high-end escort Demont hired 6 months ago for a tech conference in Vegas. He became obsessed with her. I felt a wave of nausea, followed quickly by a spike of adrenaline. So why introduce her as a VP? Because, Sam smiled darkly, he put her on the company payroll. He created a phantom executive position so he could use corporate funds to pay her $250,000 salary, plus bonuses that covered her luxury apartment in Chicago. My jaw tightened. That's corporate embezzlement. It's a felony, Sam corrected cheerfully. But wait, it gets better. Do you remember when you filed the police report for the stolen ring on Tuesday? Yes. Demont was furious. He tried to convince me not to do it, saying it would ruin the optics of the party. He was furious because 2 weeks prior, he had quietly taken out a massive, heavily inflated insurance policy on the sapphire, Sam revealed, sliding a copy of the policy across the table. He forged your signature as the co-owner of the estate. He intended for you to think you lost it, wait a few weeks, and then file a claim to collect a cool $3 million in cash to cover up the gaping hole he was making in the company's accounting. When you filed the police report immediately, you initiated an official investigation that he couldn't control. He was terrified the cops would find out he took it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So he stole from his company, stole from me, committed insurance fraud, and forged my signature. Exactly, Sam nodded. And thanks to Arthur Pendleton, the board initiated an emergency forensic audit this morning. By noon today, Demont won't just be fired. He will be facing federal charges. The sheer scale of his betrayal was breathtaking, but any lingering heartbreak I felt was instantly incinerated by the absolute necessity of self-preservation. I wasn't going to be the victim in his tragedy. I was going to be the architect of his demise. Draft the divorce papers, Sam, I instructed, my voice devoid of any emotion. I want everything. The house, the cars, the investment portfolios. He can have his clothes and whatever dignity he can scrape off the floor. I also want you to contact the district attorney regarding the forged signature on the insurance documents. I want to press full charges. Consider it done, Sam said, gathering her papers. He's going to call you, Christa. When the reality of his situation hits him, he's going to panic. Let him call, I replied. I have nothing left to say. 3 months later. The sprawling Connecticut house felt incredibly peaceful without the constant, phantom buzzing of Demont's phone. I stood on the back patio, wrapped in a cashmere shawl, watching the autumn leaves fall into the pristine swimming pool. The fallout had been spectacular and merciless. Arthur Pendleton and the board fired Demont with cause, stripping him of his severance and his equity in the logistics company he had built. When the embezzlement came to light, they handed him over to the authorities. Chaya Jenkins, realizing she was heavily implicated in a federal corporate fraud case, immediately turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity, testifying against Demont in grand jury proceedings. She claimed he had manipulated her, and while I knew she was complicit, I honestly didn't care. She was merely a symptom. Demont was the disease. The divorce proceedings were the shortest Sam had ever overseen. Facing decades in prison and drowning in legal fees, Demont had no capital to fight me. I secured absolute ownership of the estate, our joint accounts, and a substantial portion of his remaining unfrozen assets as restitution for the financial fraud he committed against our marital estate. My phone vibrated on the patio table. It was a collect call from a correctional facility. I stared at the screen. I knew what it would be. It would be Demont, begging. It would be Demont, crying about how the prison food was terrible, how his lawyer wasn't returning his calls, how he had made a mistake and still loved me. He had called 5 times this week already. I picked up the phone. I didn't accept the charges. Instead, I pressed the button to permanently block the number. I looked down at my left hand. The heavy, cushion-cut Ceylon sapphire caught the autumn sunlight, throwing brilliant blue reflections across the stone patio. It was no longer a symbol of a broken marriage or a husband's ultimate betrayal. I had taken it back to Gregory, the jeweler on Fifth Avenue, and had the platinum band melted down entirely. I had the sapphire reset into a fierce, modern pendant that now rested securely against my collarbone. It wasn't a ring anymore. It was a trophy. A reminder that a house built on a foundation of 1,000 little secrets will inevitably collapse, but if you are smart enough and strong enough, you can always salvage the most valuable stones from the wreckage to build a fortress of your own. There is nothing quite as satisfying as watching a master manipulator fall into a trap of their own making. Thank you so much for following Christa's incredible journey of betrayal, strategy, and ultimate revenge. If you loved watching her dismantle Demont's life piece by piece, please leave a like on this video, share it with someone who appreciates brilliant karma, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another dramatic real-life story.